hope you all had a good lunch. I had a look, and now I think the numbering here in this translation does not refer to the verses. So I think from number 6, onwards, I think in each numbering there are 2 verses. So. Okay, so on page, we are now on page 2, number 7. These teachings make it easy to understand how there's nothing contradictory in all the Buddha's teachings and make every scriptural pronouncement without exception dawn on your mind as a personal instruction. They make it easy to discover what the Buddha intended and protect you as well from the abyss of the great error. Because of these 4 benefits, what discriminating person among the erudite masters of India and Tibet would not have his or her mind be completely enraptured by these stages of the path, arranged according to the 3 levels of motivation, the supreme instruction to which many fortunate ones have devoted themselves. Is this good? Okay. Okay. So those of you who have been to the Lamrim teachings that His Holiness gave a few years back, starting in 2012. So with the great treatise on the stage of the path, then in the very beginning, then Rinpoche talks about the 4 qualities of the Lamrim. As it is mentioned here, the first is these teachings make it easy to understand how there's nothing contradictory in all of the Buddha's teachings. So this is a very important feature. So here it is referring to how within the Buddha's teachings you have the teachings on Hinayana, and then the Mahayana teachings, and then which would also include both the Pranjaparamita teachings as well as the Vajrayana teachings. So it is to state that all these different types of teachings do not necessarily contradict each other. For example, the Hinayana teachings, and a central theme or a central teaching of that is, of course, the Changzhou Sodu. The 37, the 37, how do you say, the 37 parts, Changzhou, so, excuse me? The 37 wings of enlightenment. Yes. So anyhow, this category of the path is the central path to liberation according to the Hinayana tradition or to the Hinayana teachings. And this is of course emphasized in the Pali tradition. I'm trying to find the exact term. So it is that within these 37 parts, the four mindfulness is the first part. So the 37, then it's divided into seven parts, and the first set would be the four mindfulness practice. So therefore you can therefore then it is obvious that mindfulness the practice of mindfulness is a central practice of the Hinayana tradition. And of course, the eightfold path is the last set within that, within the 37. Now the robe is my robes are doing the talking. Maybe I will just use this dictionary and hope that the term comes up. 장조 소주 괜찮으세요? 장조 소주. 나. 견뎌송을 윙송을 limbs, limbs. In this dictionary, it's coming up as the 37 harmonies with enlightenment. Okay. Anyhow, so I remember seeing this other translation. Let me try.
37 practices. 37 practices?
Yes, 37 practices. Yes. Yeah, the 37 practices. Chanju Sodu. So mainly, when Buddha taught in the first turning of the wheel of the Dharma, the first turning of the wheel of the Dharma, then that was the path that he taught, that the Buddha taught. So according to the Hinayana, then this is the path that one takes. And then in the Pranja Paramitayana, then the path is then, of course, we have the category of the method aspect and then the wisdom aspect. And with the wisdom aspect, then that is when we talk of the true nature of reality. And then regarding the true nature of reality, then in the Panchaparamita, they talk of the 108 bases on which the Buddha then gave teachings of emptiness, right? Using those 108 objects as the basis on which he then clarified on emptiness, using numerous analogies and so forth. And then with Tantrayana, then with Vajrayana, then there are different ways. Then there are again different categories of the path. So then it may all seem quite different, right? To the untrained eye or to the untrained person, then all these paths may seem distinctly different and somewhat contradictory. For example, like in the Hinayana teachings, then one is not supposed to, of course, one is supposed to refrain from the act of killing against all, what's the word, what's the expression, against all, that no matter what happens, you cannot compromise with that one should never, that one should, the Hinayana approach is that it has an uncompromising approach to when it to the act of killing a human being, let's say, right? So it is uncompromising in that way. It doesn't matter. You cannot justify that at all, right? Whereas in the Panja Paramitayana, it's more like in the Bodhisattva teachings, then there are instances that for a great benefit, then sometimes there are stories when a Bodhisattva would take the life of someone to benefit or to save the life of others. There are stories like that. And then in Vajrayana, you would find even more extreme examples, right? So again, to those of us who are untrained, who are unfamiliar with the significance of these different teachings and the meaning behind those stories, those examples, then this may seem contradictory. This level of teachings may seem contradictory, and this is what Rinpoche is referring to when he says that the teachings of the Buddha has this greatness, that they don't contradict each other, that there is no contradictions within those different types of teachings. Here, if I may quote from Rinpoche's extensive Lamrim, to know that all the teachings are free of contradiction means to understand that they are the path by which one person becomes a Buddha. So here, Rinpoche gives like a definition of what it means to know that that the Buddha's teachings are free of contradictions. To understand that they are the path by which one person becomes a Buddha. Some are the main points of the path, some are the various branches of the path. And then Rinpoche says that Bodhisattvas make it a goal to accomplish the good of the world, all living beings, since Bodhisattvas must take care of students who are followers of all three lineages, the three vehicles, Shravakas, Praditya Buddhas, and Bodhisattvas. They must train in the paths of those three lineages. So, because the Bodhisattva has to benefit the other students who are on these three paths, then therefore they should also learn, and they should then be able to teach them. Because if you are not if the Bodhisattva does not know the Hinayana path, then the Bodhisattva will not be able to benefit the student on the Hinayana path. And if the Bodhisattva does not know the Shrvaka path, then he wouldn't be able, the Bodhisattva wouldn't be able to benefit the Shrvakas, right? So this is again one reason why those of us who aspire to be Bodhisattvas and who are learning the ropes, should I say, who are trying to become Buddhist, who are trying to be Bodhisattvas, then I think tolerance, I think is a very important part of our training process, to tolerate our fellow human beings, irrespective of the fact that they might share a different view, or they might have different beliefs, or they might have a different background, etc. And as Rinpoche had mentioned here, that because the Bodhisattva has this strong wish to benefit all sentient beings, and especially those who are already on the path to enlightenment, and that since that also includes Shrvakas, then it is reasonable that alone is reasonable for the Buddhist, for why the Bodhisattva needs to not only know the Bodhisattva path, but also the path of the Shrvaka. But on a different note, then for one to actually achieve bodhicitta, then one must also be familiar. One must first familiarize one with the path that is common to the Shrvakas. Because if you do not think about the Four Noble Truths, if one does not think about the Four Noble Truths, if one doesn't meditate on the truth of suffering, then it would be impossible to attain bodhicitta. So that is another reason why the teachings of on the Hinayana do not contradict with the teachings of the Mahayana, and how they are compatible, how the teachings, how the Hinayana teachings, they are the foundation upon which then one develops the Mahayana path. That is very important. And also on that note, then again, I think it is important that we take this first feature and then also apply this to our lives. And then because since the Tibetan Buddhism has 4 traditions, then it is important that we really apply this feature right now on the matter at hand, right? To where it really matters, to not some far away place, but where we are right now. So to apply this to the system that we are currently in, I think that's very important. So to have an appreciation for the other traditions as well, and then once you can manage that, then you can sort of grow from that, and then appreciate the other religious systems as well. And then this is I think very important. So we can sort of apply this and then broaden that. And here Rinpoche says, it is contradictory to propound that you should not train in the scriptural collections of the Hinayana because you are a Mahayana practitioner. So this is very important, right? That we are free to study all of Buddha's sutras. We cannot say this Buddha's teachings, this Buddha's teachings is only suitable for me. That is for the Hinayana. I am a Mahayana. Saying something like that, it's not good. It's not proper. And Rinpoche says that we should not think like this. This is, I think, it's too it's too worldly. That's really like our basic human thinking. All that discrimination, that strong bias. This is bias thinking. So it is important to know that, and Rinpoche makes this very clear. It is contradictory to propound that you should not train in the scriptural collections of the Hinayana because you are a Mahayana practitioner. And then it further clarifies that there are many shared paths, many common paths, and those common paths are very important. As I said before, that if you do not practice the common paths, the shared paths, then if you do not practice that, then you cannot practice the unshared or the unique Mahayana practices, So you cannot do that without first practicing the shared, the common paths. And sometimes I think even the word Hinayana and Mahayana, that creates some confusion. I think Hinayana means something like the lesser vehicle, something like that. But when we say lesser or greater, we do not, this is not to berate, right? Berate or belittle the other tradition or the other vehicle, but it is labeled in the context that those who engage in the Hinayana paths, since they do so with a motivation that is not as great or encompassing as the motivation for the Mahayana teachings or for the Mahayana practices. So in that regard, motivation-wise, then the motivation isn't as great, and then the path that is involved in that process, it isn't as extensive, and then of course the result that one the achievement that one gains as a result of practicing that path isn't as great as Buddhahood. So it is only in that context that we use this term, and it is not to be something like it is not meant to be taken something like, oh, we are the good guys and they're the bad guys. It's not something like that, It's not saying we are the Mahayana, we are the bigger team and they're the smaller team, It's nothing like that. So I think this point, His Holiness always makes it very clear, and sometimes His Holiness even jokes, if we are not careful, then this might really end up like that, This might really end up like, oh, we are the Mahayana, and they are the lesser vehicle. And if you do this thing, then this is really silly, His Holiness would say, because if this is how you do it, then on the other hand, the Hinayanas, they look at the Mahayanas and say, these are not even the real. They're not even true Buddhists, They're not even real Buddhists. So if you like sort of play this game, then it's never ending, It just goes back and forth, and no one really benefits from that. I think His Holiness was referring not to Mahayana in general, but to Tibetan Buddhism, because that has elements of Tantra, right? Has elements of Tantra. So, but I met someone in Europe, and we had some conversation, and he said something quite interesting. He said that, in fact, Tantra didn't come from Hinduism, but it originated from Buddhism, and then later the non-Buddhist schools integrated that into their practice as well. So this is quite interesting. I don't know for a fact if because he wasn't like a professor on these subjects or anything like that, but I just thought it was interesting, because I was always under the impression that somehow, Tantra from Hinduism sort of influenced Buddhism or something like that. Yeah, but he said it was the other way around, Then that would really change the narrative, and then we can sort of like say, right. Maybe that's wishful thinking. Okay. And then the second feature, which is the greatness of enabling one to understand that all of the scriptures are instructions for practice. This is again very important, because it's easy to make the mistake that to distinguish, within Buddha's own teachings or commentaries of his teachings, categorizing them into an explanatory teaching, or I don't know if that's the right word. Explanatory teaching. Is that okay? A teaching that just explains, and then there is a teaching that one actually has to practice, So if one is not careful, then one could end up, distinguishing Buddha's teachings into those two categories. That there's the first category where it explains things or explains reality or explains some abstract ideas, and then there is this other set of teaching which is really meant to be practiced. So here that we should understand that all the scriptures, which would include Buddha's own teachings and the commentaries to those teachings, that they are in fact all instructions for our practice. That was the intent of the authors of those scriptures, and not only are they the intent, not only did they intend for that, but they actually present a way of practicing, right? Not just to have some ideas, but to actually to have that they actually show a way of practicing the teachings of the Buddha, to practice. So, to that question, then, what does it mean? That if there is actually a teaching that is explained to you, and then a teaching that you practice, then it becomes, I think, quite. That's in a way like discriminating. Discriminating Buddha's teachings or the Tengyur, the scriptures or the commentaries of Buddha's scriptures. So we don't accept that. What we say is that all scriptures are meant for practicing. Yeah, they are meant so that they were given. The commentaries were written so that one could practice. Right? It is not something that you hear, for some gratification, or it's not something that you think, like food for thought. It's not something like that. It is not something to sort of stimulate our brain. It's not something to stimulate our mind, but rather it is to change our behavior, to change our behavior, to change how we think. So that way, then we can change our thinking. We can change our perspective, so that can then influence our body, speech, and then of course mind. So this is why the scriptures and all the commentaries of those scriptures were given. That was the purpose. Many times, then it states here that we might listen. Especially this happens in a academic setting, academic setting, because the monasteries in India, the great monasteries like Kanden, Sera, and Debung, where we spent many years of learning. Many years we spent learning the 5 texts, all those texts. Then I think in that setting, then we really face this danger. If the monks there, if we in that environment, if we are not careful, then we might end up really distinguishing the teaching that is explained to us, and then the teaching that we actually have to practice. So I think this is more applicable to those who are in an academic setting. His Holiness always, again, makes this point very clear that, for example, Nagarjuna's 6 treatises on Madhyamika, His Holiness always says that this is really the teaching that you should practice. It is not something that you should explain only, but it is something that it is really what you should practice. You should really practice the teachings of Nagarjuna. You should really practice those the meaning of the 6 treatises. This His Holiness will always make. He made that clear, because if you look, there is this distinction of within the well-known masters, from India, you have the great Panditas, the great Pandits, and then on the other hand, you have the great Mahasiddhas, right? The great Mahasiddhas. And many times, someone, if they are not careful, might think, the Pandits are they're academics, right? Academics, they're like professors, and then their books are like theses, dissertations, right? So they wrote those books. They might think, if you're not careful, you might think that they wrote all these books to get some fame, So they wrote all these things that most people can't understand. They wrote these things so that they might become famous in their circle, in the university. Maybe they will become famous in Nalanda or Vikramalashila, wherever, I don't know, right? Like that. So we have to be careful that many of these bandits, they were not like modern day professors. They were not, They weren't on a salary. I don't think they were being paid, But many of these bandits, on the appearance, they really looked like academics, modern day academics. They had great knowledge, but many of them, secretly, they were also great practitioners, and some even practiced, secret tantra. And so on the outside, they look like any monk who was in that monastic university setting, giving commentaries to those texts, and they might look like any other normal monk. They didn't show any. They didn't display any kind of like mysticism, or they didn't show that they had a bell and vajra. They didn't show that they were doing some secret practice. I think they were really good at keeping it a secret. Yeah. But then many times, like when they passed away, then when they cleared away the rooms, then they would find those secret objects that they did a very good job at keeping it a secret, So in truth, they were Mahasiddhas, Mahasiddhas. So if you're not careful, then we might think the works of the bandits, of like the Nalanda Panditas, are to be explained, and then the works of the Mahasiddhas are really special instructions, that they are really meant to be practiced. So His Holiness always makes that clear and says that even the works of Nagarjuna are they are really what we should practice. And also, when you use the word personal instruction, then I think it brings about a sense of closeness to the teaching, Then you begin to think, well, this is really for me, This is really for me. That when I go through the Lamrim, that I need to learn, I need to take something from this and then apply it to myself, right? Whereas if you say, this is a text that is meant to be explained only, then that doesn't give you the same sense of closeness. It doesn't give the same, I think, same joy, Then it seems like it's almost like you're going back to school, So this shouldn't be our approach to the teachings of the Buddha, but rather that all of Buddha's teachings and all the scriptures that are connected with the Buddha's teachings are meant to be practiced. And here, Rinpoche says, do not think the texts are without substance, since they merely promote a superficial knowledge and eliminate others' misconceptions. Yet the personal instructions, since they reveal the deep meaning, are supreme. So we should not make those distinctions. As Jeremy mentioned in the first feature, that Buddha's teachings have no contradiction. Some are the main practice, some are the various branches of the practice. So, because one teaching deals with a branch of the main part, that doesn't mean that is not important or that is not to be practiced. And then what means to be practiced is that just getting the main point. Well, we should not make those distinctions and rather see that and try to bring all of those, into our practice, because you cannot say, I want to practice this and I want to leave that one out. If you do that, then I think if you do that once, then you might do that twice. Then you might do that 3 times, 4 times, and then it builds. And then I think gradually, then we might start to say, oh, I will leave this one out, I will leave that one out, and I will just have this. And then pretty soon, then I think you become more lazy, you become lazy and maybe choosy, and then this is not good. Because this then, I think, will fortify laziness, it just fortifies our laziness, which we have, which we have from day one, before we even start to think about the Dharma, we already have plenty of laziness. And instead of making that go away, if you have this approach to the Dharma, this lazy approach to the Dharma, then it is counterproductive. So with the 37 practices, all of that, if we are able to include, if we are able to think about those parts and if we are able to integrate that into our practice, then this can only make our current practice stronger, stronger. Because many times we make the mistake when we think, like when we receive high initiations from our lamas, then we tend to go straight to the point, we tend to go straight to practicing those high teachings, right? Those high teachings, and then we make the mistake of overlooking all our basic practices that were explained beginning, from the Four Noble Truths, from the 37 practices of enlightenment, all of that, then we overlook that, and if you do it like this way, then I feel that unless you are an exceptional case where, by the power of your faith, and of course your samaya, and of course by the power of the deity and of the incomparable master, there are exceptional cases, but for most, then you wouldn't be able to fulfill the commitment, or you wouldn't be able to see out, or you wouldn't be able to realize, your wish of first, your first wish for practicing the highest teachings. So it's very important that we always do not forget the earliest teachings, the earliest teachings. And I think the three turning of the wheel of Dharma, it really has this significance, First, the Buddha gave the teachings on the Four Noble Truths, and he set out these paths to enlightenment. And when we say enlightenment, we are not referring to Buddhahood. At least not to the full state of enlightenment. But here, enlightenment means even arhathood would be considered a form of enlightenment. So, as you see, there are different levels, and these levels aren't meant for for you, then you practice this way, and if you are more intelligent or of higher mental capacity, then you practice only this. It's not like that. Maybe for the lower ones, they don't need to practice the higher ones, but for those who want to go on the higher paths, it is imperative that you begin from the lowest paths, and not sort of like jump straight there. You cannot, This is a nice one. By doing this, you will understand that all of the scriptures are instructions for practice. Otherwise, you will spend your entire life without discerning wisdom, practicing just some incomplete portion of the path and not the complete corpus. Thus, you will not understand that the classic texts are instructions for practice, but you will abandon them, seeing them as merely promoting superficial knowledge and eliminating others' misconceptions. So if we are not careful, then we might start to do like here as it is explained here, And then the third feature, the greatness of enabling one easily to find the conqueror's intent. So this is the third feature of the Lamrim text, and Lamrim, I think, here refers to the original Lamrim text, which would be Atisha's lamp for the path to enlightenment. Is that through that, then it helps us to easily find the Buddha's intent. So this is the third feature. Here it says that the classic texts, the scriptures along with their commentaries, are the supreme instructions. Yet even if beginners, persons without extensive training, delve into them, they will not discover their intended meaning without depending on the personal instructions of an excellent being. Even if they find the intended meaning, their search will require a very long time and a great deal of effort. However, if they depend on the personal instructions of a guru, they will easily come to know the intended meaning. These instructions of the lamp for the path to enlightenment will readily bestow certain knowledge of the key points of the Buddha's word and the treatises. So, as the king of Ngari requested Adisha to compose, this for the Tibetans and just keep it simple, then I think this is really highlighting this is really highlighting this third feature here, right? Which says that if a beginner directly perhaps approaches the scriptures, the traditional scriptures, then it would be difficult to understand them. And if you don't understand them, then how do you put them into practice, right? So these instructions given in the Adisha's Lamrim, then through that, then one is able to understand the intent of the Buddha. Yeah. And then the fourth feature, the greatness of enabling one to refrain automatically from great wrongdoing. So, as it is mentioned in Shantideva's 9th chapter, that so that all of the teachings that the Buddha gave, it was for the purpose of gaining correct view. And if one is able to get the right view, then one would refrain automatically from great wrongdoing. So the fourth feature I think highlights that by these special instructions referring to the Lamrim, referring to Adisha's Lamrim, then one is able to understand, through understanding the conqueror's intent, then just by understanding that, then one would refrain automatically from committing negative acts. So these are the four features of the text, or the four benefits. The four benefits. And then with number 8, although there is much merit to be gained from reciting or hearing even once this manner of text written by Odisha that includes the essential points of all scriptural pronouncements. You are certain to amass even greater waves of beneficial collections from actually teaching and studying the sacred Dharma contained therein. Therefore, you should consider the points for doing this properly. So, generally speaking, even by reciting or hearing the Dharma, we accumulate lots of merit. There's this story of, I think, who was it? I think it was Vasubandhu, as he was reciting the sutras. I think there was this bird nearby, and later the bird then was reborn as a human being, and later became to be one of Vasubandhu's students. And Vasubandhu had four disciples who were known to excel even more than Vasubandhu in special fields. And this particular disciple excelled in Ngomba, in Abhidharma, because in his previous life, this bird, I think it was a pigeon, the pigeon would sit and listen. The pigeon would hear when Vasubandhu recited all the Abhidharma sutras. So there is one story like that. So just by hearing, now I'm sure the pigeon wasn't thinking. I'm sure the pigeon wasn't trying to think, wasn't trying to understand what was being uttered, but just by merely hearing that, the pigeon took a good human rebirth and later went on to become a disciple and excelled at the meaning of the sutra that the previous life heard as a pigeon, right? So imagine if that is the case, then we are so fortunate, to have met our spiritual mentor, and many of you, I think, have had received teachings from His Holiness, and of course, specifically the Lamrim teachings. And just imagine how much merit we have accumulated. So we are extremely fortunate in that regard. But just hearing and reciting these Dharma is not enough. We might be creating lots of good merit, but we still have lots of obscurations of knowledge and afflictive emotions, and we are constantly being influenced by those emotions. That so it's important that we do something. We do something to overcome those problems, and the way to do that is to by first hearing the Dharma, and then contemplating on the meaning of the Dharma, and then in the end meditating or habituating oneself with the Dharma. So this is very important, and of course those three practices start with first hearing the Dharma, and then once you have heard the Dharma, which I think many of us have had plenty opportunity of hearing the Dharma many times, and so I'm sure that we have also spent many hours, if not years, thinking on the teachings, on the intent of our guru. So this is very important, and once we have a firm grasp of that, a firm understanding of that, then it is only a matter of really continuing that and making that part of our mind stream. Many times, when we are thinking on the thinking level, we are very good when we are in this kind of a setting, or when we are in a discussion group, or when we are in, like I can speak for myself, so when I'm in the debate courtyard, then my mind is sort of fixed, it's in that mood, right? But then when I'm in my room, or when I'm out there on the street, then that mind is nowhere to be seen. It just disappeared, right? And then it might be a little challenge to sort of try that again. So this is what it means to, I guess, meditate. Many times when we say meditate, I think people get the feeling that immediately the posture and all of that, and that comes into the picture. Again, that is a very good way of meditating, but I think but meditating is more than just having the right posture or doing some of those preliminary things. It's really about I guess it's really about of bringing what we have heard, what we have contemplated. It's really about bringing those things into our lives, even when we are out of our sessions, if I may use that word. When we are out of our meditative sessions, or when we are out of our, like when we are off guard, it's so, in a way, it's always being on guard, but we have to be on guard in the time, like in a normal time, when you are sort of like off guard or out of your comfort zone, then that's when you have to bring that, And if you can do that, then that's, I think, the best form of meditation. Being always conscious of the teachings, being always conscious. So contemplation, it seems like it's only when you're having some thoughts, It's not something that you have habituated yourself to the point that it sort of becomes like a second skin. It's only when you sort of have to push yourself, towards that direction, that's when you are thinking. But meditation means that even when you are not pushing yourself, even in other words, it has to be spontaneous, right? It needs to have this spontaneity. And if you have that, then you really would have no problems thinking about the Dharma as you're walking down the street, or when, or in other situations where, if you have not gained that level of control over your mind, then it would be very difficult to practice the Dharma. Now with this spontaneity, then that shouldn't be a problem, right? So that's why that we should always sort of train ourselves, in this order. by first hearing and then thinking, contemplating, and then meditating or habituating oneself. As it is mentioned in Abhisamaya Alamkara, then Maitreya states very clearly that meditation has a connotation of habituating oneself, right? And then it states here that you are certain to amass even greater waves of beneficial collections from actually teaching and studying the sacred Dharma contained therein. So this is very important that when we once we have gone through these trainings, then it is important to share what we have learned with people who are who request teachings or who request our who request or who ask for, what's the word, seek counsel. Then it's very important that you share with them what you have learned, as it is because the beneficial collection from teaching and studying that is extremely great. So we should do that. Let me check the Tibetan translation. Okay. And yes, Vasubandhu's Abhidhamma Kosha then says that that within Buddha Dharma there are two types. One is, I think it's better that I read it from here. Yes, this is Vasubandhu's Treasury of Knowledge, Abhidhamma Kosha. The excellent teaching of the teacher is twofold: those teachings having a nature of scripture and those having a nature of realization. So, the nature of scripture obviously refers to the scriptures, or maybe the 84,000 volumes, the 84,000 volumes, the 84,000 Dharma heaps. I don't know if that's a good translation, but anyway, to the 84,000 teachings of the Buddha. And this 84,000, now I don't know if I can translate this, but they correspond. So you have 4 sets of 21,000, right? Right? 21,000, okay? So the first 21,000 was given to those, was given for the purpose of overcoming the overcoming. Okay, the first 21,000 teachings were given to those students, to those practitioners who were engaging more in, let's say, desire, right? And then the second 21,000 for anger, and then the third 21,000 who were engaging more in ignorance, and then the fourth set of 21,000 for those who were engaging in the 3 mental poisons evenly, right? Yes. Yes. So therefore, in total, we have 84,000. 84,000. Yeah. There, yeah. So the teachings of the Buddha is twofold: scriptural and realized. So they come in 2 forms: scriptural and realized. And then it says here, the scriptural teachings determine the way that you take the teachings in hand, the procedures for practice. The teachings as they realized are your practice of these procedures in accordance with how you have already determined them. Maybe I'll repeat that once more. The scriptural teachings determine the way that you take the teachings in hand, the procedures for practice. The teachings as they are realized are your practice of these procedures in accordance with how you have already determined them. So again, with the first of the twofold, the teachings having a nature of scripture, the scriptural teachings. So for a beginner, first we learn the scriptures, right? We have to rely on the scriptures. Even though the Buddha can show us the path, the medium for showing us the path is, of course, the scriptural teachings. So directly, we have to rely on the Buddha's scriptural teachings. And once we have heard the teachings, once after having heard these teachings, when we practice this, when we practice the teachings, the meaning that is contained in the scriptural teachings, then when you gain a certain realization, then that would be the teaching that has the nature of realization. So as it is mentioned here, the teachings as they realized are your practice of these procedures in accordance with how you have already determined them. So of course you determine them by first listening to the scriptures. Once you have determined them, then you practice, and when you gain a certain realization, then that is the second of the twofold teaching. Thus, these two serve as cause and effect, the scripture teachings being the cause and the realization being the effect. Then this is a popular example. For example, it is like showing a horse the race course before you race. Once you have shown it, you then race there. It would be ridiculous to show the horse one race course and then race on another. Okay, number 9. Having taken refuge, you should see that the root cause excellently. Now, can you help me with this pronunciation? Propitious. Thank you. You should see that the root cause excellently propitious for as great mass of good fortune as possible for this and future lives is proper devotion in thought. I must say that some of these sentences are awfully long, and they are really a mouthful for me. for a beginner like myself. Okay. Did I finish the sentence? Oh. Okay, this is second take. What was that? Take two? Take two, okay. Take two. Having taken refuge, you should see that the root cause excellently propitious for as great a mass of good fortune as possible for this and future lives is proper devotion in thought and action to your sublime teacher who shows you the path to enlightenment. After reading one sentence, then I should take a breather. or maybe have coffee, you know. Right. Yes. I think let alone explaining this sentence, even reading through it is so difficult, you know. Once I've gone through this, reading it, then I've had enough, and now I just want to. I think the whole verse is made into a sentence. Thus, you should please your teacher by offering your practice of exactly what he or she says, which you would not forsake even at the cost of your life. I, the yogi, have practiced just that. You who also seek liberation, please cultivate yourself in the same way. I think when we do this for our practice, then we replace this part, you know. Instead of saying, I, the yogi, have practiced just that, we say, the incomparable master has practiced like that. So me, I, who also seek liberation, will cultivate in the same way. So we make a small modification for our practice. You know. This is only for our practice. Of course, we will not edit this in the root text, because the root text comes from the viewpoint of Rinpoche. So when we do it for our practice, we just instead of saying I, then I, the previous I, not the letter I, that remains still the same, but the previous I is then, yes, that's from the viewpoint of the incomparable master. Okay, so maybe this point uh, I will try to go maybe tomorrow. So at this point, maybe we can have some questions.
Hello. Thank you, Rinpoche. Trying to organize my thought. I had one question left over from this morning. You started by telling, talking about Manjushri, and said, as far as you knew, he was not a historical figure. And is that correct? Did you say that? Did I understand you correctly?
Of course, there was a historical Manjushri as well. That is in the records. Both Matriya and Manjushri were historical in a way, but then when we think of Manjushri as like with the sword and all of that, then I don't think you could find that. He wasn't historical as Shakyamuni was. Shakyamuni Buddha was, who was a real person that came to our planet, right, to India, and was born there. So with Manjushri, the celestial being, of course, did not have the same history. So that's what I meant.
Okay, so you just sort of defined, in a way, Manjushri as a celestial being. And of course have guided many great teachers in the history. And yet, how should, a couple things. I was just recently in Nepal and heard a kind of legend of the Kathmandu Valley was, I don't know whether it's a legend or whatever. I mean, many thousands of years ago, Manjushri actually created the Kathmandu Valley or something with the help of Vajrayogini. I came across this story, of course, on the internet while going to pilgrimage to some Vajrayogini holy places. So I'll just split my question and say, so how do we take those kind of legends as myths, as, it was very beneficial to my mind to actually consider that, because the Kathmandu Valley is such a holy place for so many monasteries and of course the big stupa, et cetera, et cetera. So in what way do we understand that kind of story, legend?
Yes, thank you. When I visited Nepal as a young little kid, I've had the good opportunity to go around some of the pilgrimage sites. Am I audible? Little louder? Okay. So when I was a little boy, I got to visit Nepal, and if it is not a false memory or a false remembering, I do remember hearing this story that I think that there was this legend of Manjushri splitting, I think, a mountain into two,
yeah.
with his sword, something like that. So definitely Nepal is a very special country. It has very strong connection with the Dharma, with and it has many pilgrimage sites, and also I think it was the 33rd king, Tibetan king Tsongkhapa. One of his wives also came from Nepal, and obviously there's this strong connection with Tibet as well. So when I hear of these legends, when I hear of these old stories, especially if you go, I think, to very old pilgrimage sites, you will always encounter, many unique stories, and they all have one thing in common. Maybe not that. But I wish it was quite pleasant like that. I think this is the right background music when you're visiting the pilgrimage sites. It goes really hand in hand, very, very much. Thank you for that. Thank you. Well, when you hear, all these stories, they have one thing in common. I was going to say is that to the untrained person, they don't sound realistic. They don't sound realistic. But that doesn't mean that is not the case. Not at all. My approach is that when I hear any legend or any story, be it with this tradition or that tradition, you know what my approach is that I don't give it much thought. I think I don't like to sort of analyze and think about whether that was indeed true or not, because I know that I don't have the means to analyze whether that really happened or not. That's beyond me at this point, right? But I also accept that there is this thing as a vision. I also believe that we have a conventional existence here where we can all share, and I think there is also a different dimension where we cannot see them or we cannot communicate. They could be right here, but it could be like a multi-dimension. We could be living in such a place. So it's quite difficult to reject something on the basis that we cannot directly perceive them, or it doesn't make sense to our conventional or our mind, this conventional mind, right? Or something, or because it doesn't go hand in hand with our experiences, then we cannot reject something on that basis alone. So, but then on the other hand, we do have to accept that there are made up stories, right? We do have to accept that. So it was a bit like yesterday when there was this question of how do we really know whether the other person really has afflictive emotions, or is it a case of us sort of mirroring our faults onto that person, right? So we have also something similar here, that there really is this thing called a vision, and then there is this thing that is like an hallucination of sorts, right? So it is a difficult subject, and I don't think that right now, with my limited, with my limitations, I don't think I can say this is a real vision, and then be able to say, well, this is not a real vision. This is just pure hallucination. I cannot. I can't make that distinction. But still, I think that, as His Holiness said, that many of these things are visions, right? For example, like with the vulture's peak, with the tens of thousands of followers. What's the word? Gathering there to listen to Buddha's teachings on ultimate existence. That is something I believe in, but then I cannot. Right now, I don't have the means to back that up. Back that up by experience. But see, when you experience it, that's, I think, only when you can be so sure that that really is the case, right? So we just need to wait, I guess. We just need to wait and really get the first person's experience ourselves. But that takes time, and we just have to be sincere, and to have these experiences, I think you really need to have a good mind. When I say a good mind, a suitable mind, an open mind, right? Because if so many of our potential, so many of our mind's potential is not realized due to our not accepting the reality, or really purposely sort of inhibiting our growth, our mental growth. So we really have to have an open mind. I think that's very important. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't necessarily looking for scientific verification or anything, but what was your second point? My notes aren't so clear. I have in my notes, first, the historical point, which we talked about. And if historical, then there would be emanations, but how do we think of different practices like orange manjushri, white manjushri, black manjushri, which exist as practices given by teachers, especially in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition?
How do we explain that?
Well, again, would it be they're not emanations, right?
They are all emanations of Manjushri.
Oh, all emanations
yes.
of Manjushri.
Yes.
Okay, so and with Manjushri being a celestial being.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and different aspects
Yes.
and different functions.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think the color of those particular forms of Manjushri would correspond to the practices involved, and of course you know that the color would also corresponds to the 5 aggregates. So there might be different emphasis on the path to purify the 5 aggregates. So the color might correspond to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rinpoche. I have a question. As a beginner, I think I should focus on the basics. But when there's teaching a highest yoga, like the emptiness, should I go? Should I take the teaching? If I should, what should I do with the teachings after take them?
Oh, thank you. Have you received? You have not received highest yoga tantra yet, right?
Not yet.
Okay. Are you familiar with the concept of emptiness?
I've heard.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh. Well, so have I. I've only heard. Well, you haven't heard what I've. You haven't. How do I say this now? You haven't heard what I haven't heard, or what?
You haven't heard what I have heard.
No. Yeah, you haven't heard what I haven't heard. Yeah. Well, you have heard of emptiness, so I think you're good to go. I think when we first hear about emptiness, we have to always think, whether we have to think whether this makes sense or not, right? I think this is very important. And if you have heard about emptiness, then it's very important, I think, to not only listen to emptiness only, but also, if you look at the works of Nagarjuna, to also think about pratitya samutpata, dependent origination or dependent arising. I think that would be helpful to clarify emptiness. Yes. So if you are interested, then I would perhaps first learn more about dependent origination, and then gradually, then you can think about emptiness. Yes. But it's really a personal choice, right? Just because you're here, please don't feel that you have to listen to emptiness, right? Or that you have to take teachings on emptiness. If you do that, then I think it becomes somewhat superficial. If you just do something on the basis because you're friends or you're part of a group that is doing something, and you're sort of just like cruising around, cruising around, then again, there are exceptions. For some people, it really turns out good, but for many others, that usually doesn't has a very desirable, pleasant result. So you have to think, and like I said yesterday, first maybe because so many books are readily available, that you can first maybe study, just have have some sort of have a feel, just sort of like look and see, just to see if that appeals to you, if that appeals to you. And it's very important that when you think of when you approach emptiness, it's very important to first perhaps to know the purpose of the teachings on emptiness. This is, I think, very important, because if you don't think about the purpose of emptiness, then if you just approach it as just a pure philosophical view or some philosophical point or philosophical object, then I think it wouldn't be that beneficial. If you approach emptiness as just a pure object of what's the word? Curiosity? What?
Intellectual.
Oh, just intellectual inquisition. Inquisitive. Curiosity. Okay. Yes. So that would be good, I think. And regarding highest yoga tantra teachings, then it is difficult for me to to give any advice on to anyone to say you should take it or you shouldn't take it. It's difficult for me to say that, because I like yesterday, I don't have clairvoyance. I cannot know whether it is the right thing for you or not. I don't know, so I cannot give any advice. But first, the safer thing is always to begin with these teachings, with the Sutrayana teachings first, and build a good base, build a good base. And once you have that, then you can then gradually, take the higher teachings. That is usually how it is done. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Rinpoche, for this morning. I really appreciated your somewhat extended historical perspective, and I wanted to ask you if you could elaborate just a little bit on the dark period before Atisha brought the teachings back to Tibet, and was it just one king, or was it a longer period of time, and if you even know who the king was. And I also just wanted to say that I'm deeply grateful because, it just, when I think about it, it gives me great hope because of not only what's happening in Tibet now with the difficulty to really fully and freely practice, but it's happening around the world. Even with indigenous people, the Bushmen in Africa are being denied their way of life. And it gives hope because it shows how resilient these deep practices are, and that irrespective of the counter forces trying to expel them or defeat them, that they can survive. And so I thank you for that. But I'm just curious also to know, if you happen to know, how long that period of darkness was and who the king was, or kings plural.
I learned that in history, when I was, I think, 18, but now I seem to completely forget that period. It wasn't so long. I think it was less than 100 years. I think something like 80 years, that period of darkness. And that king was assassinated quite soon. He was assassinated. And yes, he was assassinated. And Salung Bege Doji, he was the person who assassinated this king, Hudum Zembo. That was the name of the king, but he had more like a nickname called Lang Tharma. So they say he had horns But I think this is only figurative speaking, right? Because he wasn't so nice. But his real name was Udum Tsempo, and Lalong Pegidoji was the one who assassinated him. And there was this big show. No, there was, I think, what do you call that? That long stone pillar with lots of old letters on that. Yes, and so there was something like an opening of some sort, and the king was invited, and then that's when Lalong Begudoji, took the time to assassinate the king, and so he did a black hat dance, So before he went there, he had a white horse, so he put coal and painted it black, and he had everything black. He performed a black hat dance, and then he shot the king, with bow and arrow, and then he fled the scene, and then he took off his black dress, black costume, and he was wearing all white inside. And then as he crossed the river, then after the horse had submerged, then it came out all white, and he was able to escape. So there is some story like that, but I don't remember exactly that period of darkness. I will try to get back. Yeah. Okay, so we have 10 more minutes, and is that the end of the questions? Oh, Moran.
This question is just short and simple and hopefully easy to answer. What are you were reading from Tsongkhapa, Lama and Chenmo? I just like the references. I mean, page, not necessarily page number, but what chapter, which volume. So anybody else may be interested in following up?
Yes, this is the great treatise on the stages of the path to enlightenment. This is volume 1.
Okay.
Volume 1, published by Snow Lion. Yeah. I think this is the latest. I don't know if there are other English versions, but this is I think the main.
That's the one we've been studying for the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And which chapter?
Oh, which chapter? Sorry. So the chapter is called "The Greatness of the Teaching."
Thank you.
Yeah, the greatness of the teaching. And in the evening, we will be doing talk. So talk means accumulation. Accumulation. I think that is the meaning of the word talk. Accumulation. In a conventional sense, that's when the dakas and dakinis accumulate, they come together, right? Tsongkhapa. It could mean that. And then in a more ultimate sense, then it refers to, I think, the union, the union of the exalted wisdom and Swanam. Yeah. Yeah. You all know, I know. So it would be, today is talk day, and I think, La. I'm sorry, please.
Yeah, in the 1970s, I had the opportunity to see the Karmapa. And so my question is, now there are two Karmapas claiming reincarnated from the one I saw in the 70s. What is your comment on this?
Sometimes His Holiness, when confronted with questions, His Holiness would say, I don't know. And I just love that answer. You know? I don't know. But we say that for some tulkus, there can be multiple emanations. You know, there can be multiple emanations. I don't know if that is the case here or not. As I said before, sometimes if I think about it, I'm not so sure even if I'm able to say for a fact whether the person, you know, besides me in the aeroplane seat indeed has afflictive emotions or not. I cannot decide that. So when it comes to such high level, then I think I'm the last person that you should ask something like that, you know. Yes. Thank you. Hey, but you said that you have met the previous Karmapa?
I did.
Oh, yes. That must have been quite an experience. Yeah?
He was in, a friend of mine took me, we went to a place in Los Angeles and Karmapa was there. I guess he was there for a few days and there was a little ceremony.
Mm.
I didn't personally get introduced, but I mean, I was in the room.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Good. Yeah, so we'll be doing so tonight, and I don't think I will need to elaborate on that further. But maybe when we do talk tonight, from the Lamrim bit, you know, the Lamrim part, then maybe from then on, maybe it would be a good idea to do it in English. So first, beginning, maybe we try to do everyone together in Tibetan, but from the Lamrim part, then I think you can do, or you do in English. Yes. Okay. Thank you.
Sanjay